The HOA built 12 commercial buildings on my land, and in doing so, they made the worst mistake of their lives. They thought I was just a harmless old man with no fight left in him. They tore down my fence, flattened the memorial I built for my late wife, and laughed when I showed them the deed to my own property. Their lawyer called me a bitter relic clinging to a patch of dirt. So I smiled, nodded, and let them keep building. I watched every brick go up, every nail get hammered, every ribbon get tied for their grand opening. They thought I was beaten, but what they didn't know was that each nail they drove was part of a trap. A trap hidden inside the one place their arrogance would never let them look. If you believe no homeowner should ever be crushed by a corrupt HOA, hit that subscribe button, because this is the story of how I took everything back. It all began on an ordinary Tuesday morning. The sound was off. Not birdsong or the distant hum of a lawnmower, but something heavy, mechanical, and cruel. A deep, rhythmic crunch of metal tearing through wood. I was in the kitchen, pouring my first cup of coffee, when the mug froze halfway to my mouth. That sound again, closer this time. I walked to the window that overlooked the 5 acres my father left me. For a moment, my brain couldn't register what I was seeing. A massive yellow backhoe was ripping down my fence. The same split-rail fence that had marked my family's land since I was a kid. Each post shattered under its arm, splintering into dust. Behind the machine, a man in a clean polo shirt, HOA logo stitched proudly on the chest, was ticking boxes on a clipboard, "Come as you please." I stepped outside. Didn't even bother with shoes. The morning air was cold, but something hotter was burning deep in my chest. I didn't shout. I didn't run. I just walked. The kind of walk that tells a man you mean business. "Hey." I called out, my voice louder than I expected. The clipboard kid looked up. He couldn't have been older than 30. Perfect hair, perfect smile, the kind of man who's never worked a real day in his life. "Morning, sir," he said politely, like he was greeting me at a country club. "Can I help you?" I pointed to the backhoe. "You're tearing down my fence." He gave a little shrug and tapped his clipboard with his pen. "This property was annexed by the HOA last year. It's all part of the new commercial expansion. The details are on our website." He said it like he was talking about the weather. I felt my blood go cold. Annexed? My land? That 5-acre stretch wasn't just dirt, it was the last piece of my father's old homestead. He'd given it to me before he passed, made me promise to let it stay wild. I kept that promise. I built nothing on it, except one small oak bench by the stream where I'd scattered my wife Sarah's ashes. That was our place. The clipboard man followed my gaze toward the woods. I caught a smirk flicker across his face. "Look, I understand people get attached," he said, tone full of fake sympathy. "But this area's going commercial now. If you want to keep your little shrine, maybe you can relocate it. Progress, you know." A shrine. That's what he called my wife's resting place. I turned without saying another word. Anger wasn't going to fix this, but evidence could. I was an engineer for 40 years. I know how to solve problems with precision, not emotion. I dug through my old filing cabinet until I found the deed, yellowed paper, embossed county seal, and my name, Ray Dalton. Proof. I made a clean copy and drove to the HOA office by the golf course. Sterile walls, fake smiles, and that corporate stench of arrogance. The woman at the front desk barely looked up when I explained the situation. She waved for someone in the back, and out walked the same clipboard kid. His name tag read Camden Sharp. He didn't offer a handshake. Didn't even look at me. "We've discussed this already, Mr. Dalton," he said, sliding my deed back across the counter. "The board authorized redevelopment under the Community Eminent Domain Clause. It's for the greater good." I blinked. Community eminent domain? That's not even a real thing. Eminent domain is a government power, not something a bunch of HOA volunteers can just invent. They knew that. But they were betting I'd get confused, give up, and disappear. They told me to file a formal complaint, which they'd review at the end of the quarter. Bureaucratic death by paperwork. I left that office holding my deed like it was a ghost. My stomach sank. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a heist carried out behind smiles and bylaws. The next morning, the noise got worse. Not just crunching wood, but the scream of chainsaws and the roar of bulldozers. When I reached the edge of my land, I froze. 50 feet of forest gone. The pines my dad planted decades ago were reduced to stumps. The clearing by the stream, where Sarah's bench used to be, was gone too. Just mud, torn roots, and shattered oak. My bench lay crushed, half buried in red clay. By evening they'd finished for the day, and before leaving, they put up a tall chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. It wasn't to protect their site. It was to keep me out. As the sun dipped low, I stood there, staring through the metal mesh at what was left of my life. The anger had burned away, replaced by something colder, calculation. They thought they'd shut me out. But what they'd really done was trap themselves inside a puzzle I was about to solve. The next morning, I didn't pick up the phone or yell at anyone. I drove straight to the county clerk's office, a worn-out stone building that smelled like paper, dust, and time. The woman behind the counter had kind eyes and a magnifying glass hanging from her neck. I told her I needed to see every document tied to my property. She pulled a thick ledger from the shelf, laid it open, and slid it toward me. There it was. My father's homestead, outlined in black ink, filed decades ago. My name printed right beneath it, clean, legal, permanent. Or so I thought. Then she handed me a second file, a new plat map, filed just 8 months earlier. It looked slick, digital, too perfect. My land had been merged into the HOA's territory, the borders redrawn like my property had never existed. But one thing caught my eye. The surveyor's signature. It looked copied, identical from document to document. And the filing number was out of order. My engineering brain started connecting the dots. They hadn't annexed my land. They'd forged the records. When I left the clerk's office, I wasn't angry. I was clear, cold, focused. They hadn't just taken dirt, they had falsified the paper trail to do it. I called a lawyer that afternoon, an old colleague's referral. Decent man, good reputation. I laid everything on his desk, my deed, copies of both plats, and photos of the construction. He looked through them quietly, rubbing his jaw. "Ray," he said finally, "you're right. This looks like textbook title fraud. But they've got money, and you don't. They'll drown you in filings, motions, and appeals. Even if you win, it'll take years. My advice? Take a payout if they offer one." I walked out of his office with the kind of silence that hurts your ears. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that bulldozer rolling through the stream, crushing the oak bench where Sarah's ashes rested. I could hear it, the sound of steel against wood, over and over, until I woke up drenched in sweat. A few days later, a letter showed up in my mailbox. Certified mail. The HOA's logo stamped on the corner. Inside, a formal notice. I was now legally barred from stepping foot near the construction site. Trespassing, they called it. It was signed by Tina Marston, the HOA's vice president. I knew the name. Everyone did. She was the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood. Tight suits, tighter smile, and a voice that could peel paint off a wall. That afternoon, she came marching up my driveway with Camden Sharp beside her, clipboard in hand like always. I was getting my mail when she stopped in front of me. "Mr. Dalton," she said sweetly, though her eyes were ice. "I'm hearing reports you've been confrontational with our workers. That kind of hostility won't be tolerated. This is private property now." I stared at her for a long moment. I hadn't said a single word to anyone on that site. I didn't need to. They were setting up their story, painting me as the angry, delusional old man. The neighborhood troublemaker. I didn't argue. I didn't give her the scene she wanted. I just nodded once and turned away. After that, I kept to myself. I stopped walking the property line. Stopped talking to neighbors. From the outside, I looked defeated. Inside, I was building something. Then came the turning point. One rainy Wednesday afternoon, I went to a diner downtown. Needed to get out, clear my head. I sat by the window, stirring my coffee, when a group of men in suits sat in the booth behind me, laughing too loud, bragging too much. One of them said something that froze me in place. "Evergreen Plaza's ahead of schedule. The HOA gave us that surplus land for practically nothing, saved us a ton on permits and site prep." Surplus land. My land. They were the developers. They were laughing about it, joking about how easy the deal had been. That's when something inside me changed. The fire didn't flare up, It hardened. Cold, solid, deliberate. The kind of resolve that doesn't fade until it's done. That night, I didn't dream. I didn't even blink. I sat at my desk under the lamp, spread my father's deed across the table, and traced the boundaries with my finger. They thought this paper was worthless, a relic. But they just built 12 buildings on the wrong side of that line. And that's when the engineer in me came back to life. I picked up the phone and called a name I hadn't spoken in years. "Eddie," I said when he answered. "It's Ray Dalton." There was a pause, then a gravelly chuckle. "Well, I'll be damned. You still breathing, Dalton?" Eddie Lynn, old Navy buddy, best surveyor I ever met. Retired, grumpy, living out in a trailer somewhere past the county line. I told him everything. The bulldozers, the forgery, the fake maps. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, all he said was, "When do we start?" He showed up the next morning. Same old steel-toed boots, same faded cap, thermos of coffee in one hand, and that old survey kit slung over his shoulder. For 2 straight days, he walked the entire perimeter of my original property, reading the deeds meets and bounds, driving small iron stakes into the true corners of my land. While he worked, I made another trip to the county records office. This time, I wasn't just looking, I was gathering. Certified copies of everything. My deed, the original 1968 plat, the HOA's fake one, and even digital GIS data from the planning department. By the weekend, my garage had turned into a war room. We pinned the county map to a sheet of plywood on my workbench. Eddie printed the HOA's plat and their new construction layout on transparent overlays. Old school methods, but brutally effective. He placed the fake plat over the real one first. The lines didn't match, they were off by about 15 feet to the east. Then he laid the building overlay on top. What I saw made my chest tighten. All 12 buildings, every wall, every parking spot, every foundation, sat squarely inside my actual property lines. Not a single inch of their shiny new evergreen plaza was legally on HOA land. Eddie just grunted. "Lazy and arrogant," he said. "They didn't even check the real survey." And right then I knew. They hadn't fenced me out. They'd fenced themselves in. Once I saw those lines overlap, their concrete paradise sitting squarely inside my borders, I didn't smile. I just exhaled. For the first time in weeks, the air felt light again. Eddie leaned on the workbench, sipping his coffee. "So what now, Dalton? You gonna sue?" I shook my head. "No. Not yet. See, lawsuits take time. Lawyers drain your will. But paper, the right kind of paper, that can destroy an empire overnight." Over the next few days, I assembled a binder thicker than a Bible. Every certified document, time-stamped photo, satellite image, and affidavit Eddie and I could get our hands on. I even printed the HOA's glossy development flyers, all claiming ownership of land that legally wasn't theirs. When I was done, I made 5 identical copies. One went to the county assessor, one to the district attorney, one to the state real estate board, one to my lawyer, and the last I hand-delivered myself. To Tina Marston. She was outside her house, manicured lawn, perfect hair, barking orders into her phone when I pulled up. I walked over quietly, binder in hand. She turned, smirking like she'd been waiting to gloat. "Mr. Dalton," she said in that polished, fake sweet voice. "If this is about the no trespassing order, I handed her the binder. "You should probably read that before you finish your sentence." She looked confused but flipped through the first few pages. Then the color drained from her face. "You forged county plats," I said calmly. "You authorized construction on land that doesn't belong to you. Every inch of Evergreen Plaza is built on private property, mine." She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Her assistant, Camden, stepped closer, scanning the pages. His eyes widened like he'd just seen a ghost. I turned and walked back to my truck. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't threaten. I didn't need to. 2 days later, I got a call from my lawyer, the same one who told me not to fight. "Ray," he said, half laughing, half in shock, "the county froze the development. Permits revoked, full investigation pending. They found discrepancies in every single plat the HOA filed. You just kicked a hornet's nest." The story hit the local news that weekend. Words like fraud, forgery, and illegal annexation were plastered across every headline. The HOA board resigned overnight. Developers pulled out. And Tina Marston? She vanished, sold her house, left town, and took whatever reputation she had with her. 4 months, the construction site sat empty. Half-built buildings, weeds creeping through cracks, metal fences bending in the wind. My land, scarred, but untouched again. Eddie came by one evening, hands in his pockets, watching the sunset over the quiet lot. "You gonna sell it?" he asked. I looked at the old oak stump by the creek, what was left of Sarah's bench, and shook my head. "No. Some things you don't sell. You just protect them." He nodded, smiled faintly, and drove off. A year later, the county offered to restore the creek bed and rebuild the public path that used to cross the property. I agreed, on one condition: it stays open to everyone, free and untaxed. Sometimes I walk it at dusk. The water runs clean again, soft against the rocks. I sit where Sarah's bench once stood, close my eyes, and listen. The land's quiet now. Peaceful. People think revenge is about payback, about anger or pride. But it's not. It's about balance. About setting things right without losing yourself in the fire. I didn't take their money. I didn't want it. I just took back what was mine. And when people drive by Evergreen Road today, they still see that blacktop running straight through my ranch. But what they don't know is, every inch beneath those wheels belongs to me. Signed, sealed, and proven. Ray Dalton.